Hello and welcome to Literati on New Central TV. I'm Joseph Ike, your host. The show is one where we talk to writers, publishers, and anyone really who's involved in the literary space and contributes towards bringing these wonderful pieces of literature and helps to craft the narrative, the storyline of our culture and take this going forward. With me today on the show is none other than a literary phenomena. If you work, if you pass by, if you read, if you have any contact with the literary space in Nigeria or even in Africa, you know our guest Omolara Wood. She's a Nigerian creative writer, journalist, critic, and has been described not just by me, but by the BBC and a lot more people who use a lot higher sounding words than I do as an eminent voice of the arts in Nigeria. She has worked in arts and culture with Next Magazine. We'll talk about that time in Next Magazine for The Guardian. Her collection of short stories, Indigo, was published in 2013. Thankfully, we have a copy here with us, and we'll talk a little bit about that as we go forward. We would not have enough time on this show if we were going to go through everything that Omolara has done to contribute to the literary space, but I am personally very honored and grateful to have you on the show with us today. Thank you so much and welcome to Literati.
Thank you very much. I'm very happy to be here.
It's great to have you. Now, one of the first things that I was told to ask you when I told my friends that Omolara is going to be on the show, they're like, yes. One thing you must find out from her. Why is she partial to short stories? What is it about short stories? And if she says she is not, tell her we don't believe her. So, on behalf of all of you who have asked me to ask this question, please tell us.
Okay, I will attempt to do that. Why am I partial to the short stories? I don't know that I am particularly partial. They just happen to be the ones that I've been able to get out there so far. I suppose also that when you write a lot of journalistic pieces, essays, etc., a short story is a fictional cousin of that in terms of length, in the sense that you start, you have some things that you put in there, you have a certain focus, some themes, there's a middle and there's an end. It ends, at least the reader can read maybe in some minutes or who knows, an hour. So I'm just thinking, just sitting down here with you, that maybe I was predisposed to be able to do that, to write a short story, because I was already writing essays of 3,000, 4,000, 1,500 words, whatever length. So things that started and finished relatively quickly. It's not that I have anything against the novel form, and I have had a lot of longer narratives, shall I say, just bubbling away in my consciousness for a long time. And life and other things get in the way, and somehow I have not quite managed to get a novel manuscript out there. But I do love short stories. Okay. Short stories have their own space, their own importance. They have functions that they serve for the reader, for the culture, that a novel actually cannot do. And with a short story, you can't, like, sometimes I'm editing some books, or I'm reading a novel, and some novels, they get to the middle and they sag.
Yeah.
Or at times you see people waffling on and padding the story. You can't do that with a short story. There's a very strict discipline that is required. So that sense of a story arc, you see it most decidedly in a short story.
Now, Indigo, which is a collection of short stories by you, was published in 2013. There's a lot of critical acclaim when it was published, even up until now. This is still a reference book, and it's still a great book for anyone who, for some reason, hasn't read it yet. I don't really, and the book goes through the experiences of African women. And these are experiences. It touches on issues, concerns that a lot of African women could relate to. We're talking widowhood, barrenness, polygamy, and it crafts it in such in such a beautiful way. I'll put it that way. Now, at the time you were interviewed and asked why did you go this route, and your response to that, or quoted, was that you have great empathy, a well of feelings for what women go through, and you don't feel that these experiences are given adequate treatment in writings, well, by men and in writings in general. That was in 2013. Do you think that this has changed? Anything has changed? What is that change?
About what women go through, and if anything has changed, the question, I could answer that with a question: does anything ever really change to the extent where it doesn't need to be addressed anymore? I think issues mutate, issues evolve, new facets of the problem arise or emerge. So for instance, at the time that I was writing something like Written in Stone, I was not listening to this echo chamber, perhaps, of Twitter and women saying, see me, I feel seen, and a lot of the language through which gender is negotiated now. So you could see all of that, this 1,000 voices a minute that you hear, let's say on social media. In the media now, we're in the age of Me Too. You could say that, oh, women are giving expression to their experiences more, their reality, and they're confronting their abusers. They're saying to their parents, no, I don't want to marry this person. But I don't think that the problem is solved in a fundamental sense. It's merely mutated. And even in the speaking out, there's still a lot of conditioning that even women themselves have to overcome. And there are new means of silencing. So there is still a place for treating the condition of what it means to be a woman, the experience of what it means to be a woman, to give expression to, and there are new concerns for a woman.
The next question I was going to ask was about culture journalism. Would you say that then one of the ways we continue the conversation is through culture journalism? So the short story may shed light on something, but culture journalism is just one of the many ways that we continue these kinds of conversations outside of the story, because, like you're pointing out, the problem has not been solved, and we don't see maybe by 2024 all of this should be done, but then we need to keep it in our consciousness. We need to not delude ourselves into believing that this is no longer there. Would you say that that's part of what culture journalism offers?
Yes, I would agree that that's part of what culture journalism tries to address. Issues. Culture journalism must, to my mind, go beyond just saying, this is the best film I've ever seen. This is the best book I've ever read. Culture journalism should attempt to place art, literary works, or whatever, in some kind of continuum that helps us to better understand the past, the present, and where we're going. And culture journal, by what you choose, writing is a process of selection. And by what you choose to write about as a culture journalist, you are already indicating what you think is important. You're already, some culture journalists now might go to an art fair and talk to about 4 or 6 artists who are exhibiting, maybe out of 30 who are exhibiting, and not realize, unconsciously, not realize that all six that have been interviewed are male, or maybe 5. There's a ratio of 5 to 1. Whereas if I think that it's important to give women visibility, and now we're in this age now where we're intersectional, so it's not just women, it's other marginalized groups. and if you're conscious to all of that, the necessity of that, it influences the people the selection, the people that you actually quote in your piece.
We'll pick up this discussion about culture journalism. We have to take a short break. Once we come back from the break, we'll take up more. And your time at Next, because I'm excited to talk about that time as well. Join us when we get back from the break. Welcome back to Literati on News Central. If you're just joining us, we are having a wonderful conversation with Omolara Wood, and we've been talking about, culture journalism. You could join the conversation. Follow us at News Central TV #NCLiterati. So, tell us more about what culture journalism is. We mentioned that yes, it helps to. One of the things it achieves is keeping issues in view, and I like the way you put it that even the process of selection or inclusion of matters and how those matters are treated, the prominence, the way they are presented, tells a lot about the mindset, possibly even what's going on with that culture. But tell us a lot more about what culture journalism achieves.
Culture journalism does so much that it's difficult to say in just a few minutes sometimes, because it's an intangible treasure also. Although you're holding the newspaper page or the journal and it's tangible, but the effects are immeasurable, really. And part of what it does is it's holding it's art in itself, and it's holding a mirror for society. It's helping to cultivate this sense of a thinking society, a society that is reflective, that looks into itself and its production and what the production says about the times that we're living in. So in Nigeria, for instance, people are always saying, oh, we're going round in circles. They quote Achebe when the rain started to beat us. And obviously, Nigeria is the way it is because we tend to forget where the rain started to beat us. But culture journalism always puts things in perspective, I think. And it also venerates culture. It says that this is important and this is valid.
Yeah.
This is important and this is valid. And it's helping to critically appraise cultural production. People don't seem to understand that critique is a gift.
Yeah.
It's a gift. I've had situations like that. I've been at an airport and I'd written a review. This was during the days of Next, actually, about a theater production. And I'm actually already someone who, I love art. I can live in art forever. So, and it was actually a positive review, but the notion that I pointed out 2 or 3 things that perhaps were not entirely au fait or kosher with this portrayal, or the fact that I was questioning why the actor on the stage, a female one in this instance, was a widow in a village, but had long nails that had been fixed, as it were. The fact that I was questioning how realistic that was. So she runs into me at an airport and says, "Sit down," because even sometimes artists themselves don't realize that you've taken all this time to write properly about something that they're involved with, and that
in itself is a gift.
It's a lot of sacrifice, and to be insulted upon all of that. If you're going to review a book, it's commitment. Culture journalism is also commitment. If I'm going to review a book now, I would have devoted several days, usually, to reading it, to thinking upon it, to taking notes, and then deciding, how do I think this sits in the canon of literary works? So critiquing culture journalism also helps us to have that sense of hierarchy between sometimes high art, what is popular culture, what should be taught in school. Part of what we're also doing is showing the masses that art shapes you.
We'll take another short break, and when we come back from the break, we will talk briefly about your time at Next and about the Ake Review when we come back from the break.
News Central TV, Africa's #1 storyteller, has come with the best of both worlds. With a combination of news app and live TV, we ensure that you keep track of the latest headlines, breaking news, and in-depth analysis from professional journalists from around the continent. Download the News Central TV app on Android and iOS and get started today. Don't forget to follow us on News Central's social media platforms. News Central, Africa First.
Welcome back to Literati on News Central. We still have the lovely Omolara Wood. We've been talking a lot about culture journalism, art critic. We talked a little about Indigo, the book. You've had when we were talking earlier, I described it in my mind as a phenomenal career that spanned over 3 decades. How did you get into all of this?
I think the production side of it, as in people actually reading me, maybe is under 20 years. But I would say it's like someone asking, what makes you a writer? How did you become a writer? I think I've always been a writer because I've always had this sensibility from when I was young. And so you could say that there was a long gestation period, and you even at times when you were not yourself conscious that maybe I would like to be a writer, maybe I would like to write. But right from when I was young, people would always say, why did you put it like that? How did you say that? People always remarked. So I couldn't pretend that I wasn't aware of this because people said it all the time. It would be insincere too. And I got into actually writing for publications in that kind of almost accidental way. Someone I'd met at a wedding in Lagos. I was living in the UK, but we'd met at a wedding in Lagos, and we both lived in the UK. And just from talking over a few months, said, "Whoa, you really must write for this publication of mine." So I first started doing that, writing a column for what was then Island News, which was a community newspaper circulated around Victoria Island, Ikoyi, etc. And also Nigeria Today Online. Those were the days of this kind of newsletter thing that people got in their emails. I mean, we didn't have all this social media then, but you could, if you got that newsletter, and that went all over the world and had thousands of subscribers. And so the articles went in there also. And I think I started writing for The Guardian in 2003. Came to the attention of the managing director of The Guardian at the time, Ilu Emeka Izeze, who signed me on to write. And the first piece, and it wasn't specifically for the arts, actually. I was just supposed to write as a correspondent from London. And the first piece that I wrote, I remember, was on Rokia Traore, the Malian singer-songwriter, who I think was or still is based in Paris, and sent it to the editor of the then Sunday Guardian, Jaman Anikulapo, who you will know is deep, neck deep in art and has been like that for 30 years. And I think he was just struck. He called me up and said, "You wrote about this person, why?" I didn't know about his role in the arts, but I think in all of the time that he had edited the Sunday Guardian up to that point, no foreign correspondent had ever written their first piece, and it was about a singer. So that struck him, and then we got talking, and he realized that I was this, really, really, immersed kind of art person. And that was how I became an art columnist for The Guardian, which I did for several years then. And from then on, editing journals, etc., contributing to African Literature Today. And I think the scope, I was with some friends yesterday, and I was talking about, after Ake, one of the guests who is a friend, and a writer, was at my place. And she was taken aback, and I was also taken aback, like, do you really know me? Because she hadn't realized that I'm as immersed in visual art, nearly as much as I am in literature. So you have this many writers, they think I just comment on literary production. Whereas if I get among artists, visual artists, sometimes I'm like one of them, and I've maintained long-standing relationships with many of them for, well over a decade and more. So that was also what made being an art columnist, I think, special for me, in the sense that there were no limits when I was with The Guardian on what I could write about. So I could write about a scholar, I could write about, film, visual art, whatever. And like I said to you, that art and society, to me, they are one. It helps then that you can broaden the scope, the sphere of what is art. Yes.
But then one of the amazing things that you do is that you are passionate about documenting, preserving, and propagating Yoruba culture. Tell us a bit about that. Why is that so important to you?
I think it's part and parcel of understanding who we are.
Yeah.
And wherever we're from in Nigeria, I mean, of course, I propagate Yoruba culture because that's the one that I know. But I also hope that in doing that, people from other cultures who maybe have not been as enthusiastic will look differently at theirs also, and also propagate. I think being the writer that I became had a lot to do with a lot of things that I observed when I was young, a lot of places that I've been, and seeing that, and maybe having would I call it the presence of mind to know that even when I got to the US or London, that my culture was not necessarily inferior to this, and that there were some memories that I had and some festivals that I may have seen, or certain turns in the use of language that were so beautiful and could compare with any in the world. And that made me really venerate my culture, my language. And also growing up, you know that you can go to certain places, and if you spoke Yoruba a certain way, they will say, why are you being so conk? And of course, I silenced all of that, because wherever you want to speak English to, I can speak it with you. So I try to use my own life sometimes to show that the fact that I can speak, the fact that, because you go around now, people don't want kids to speak the mother tongue because they say, oh, it will affect the English. And so you can only try and show by your example that, well, actually, I mean, I went to primary school in Osun State, and I think that they started teaching us first in Yoruba. So I don't think that I've done too badly, considering. So it's important. It's important to show that there are things that are rich and inspiring and noble and dignified about our cultures. And and it's intrinsic to who we are, because life is about a search for meaning. It's about identity. And if you've left yourself a blank space and someone else has filled it, you are just something that's been drawn by someone else. There's this book by Hanif Kureishi. It's one of my favorite books. It's nonfiction. He's a fiction writer, but it's a piece of nonfiction where he was talking about how he became a writer. And he talked about some incident with the Persians that, oh, we know that all we've given the world is the carpet. We know that we did not we did not come up with spaceships or whatever. All we've given is, this rug. But it is in that we've expressed our true selves.
I think you put it so beautifully when you talk about those things within your culture that are beautiful and dignifying and enriching and inspiring. Those things, go after them and explore them and be vocal about them.
I mean, like Chinua Achebe said, there are things that are beautiful even in the hidden. So
thank you so much, Omolara. I mean, we could go on for as long as the time may allow us, but unfortunately we've run out of time for today's episode. Join us on Twitter, other social media handles at News Central TV, #Literati. You could send questions for Omolara. We'll make sure she gets them, and as you know, she's active on social media, so she'll probably respond herself directly. Until next time, keep reading.